Well, yes, I'm standing out here in short sleeves and a sun hat because the high today is 64. Next Wednesday, I looked at my 10-day forecast. It's supposed to get up to close to 80. And then on Friday, last Friday, I did one of my 4-year garden segments, and the weatherman there said that there is an Arctic blast coming in at the end of March. So instead of coming in like a lion and going out like a lamb, it's doing just the reverse. It's coming in like a lamb and going out like a lion. And quite frankly, I'm getting a little bit exhausted and a little bit tired of everything that still looks so brown. So I need you guys to keep encouraging me to keep my chin up, because I know it's probably as brown where you all are. So we need to have a mutual support system. Okay, that's enough whining. Now let's get back out into the garden. So here's my weekly walkabout and some of the things that I'm looking at. And a lot of things are starting to really come up, like tulips in these baskets and in my window box. Now this looks so ugly right now, you guys, but I do have faith that it will look prettier once I get away from having to protect all of this stuff from squirrels and rabbits and birds, anything that kind of digs. And it's been worse this year than I remember. Squirrels trying to dig up my bulbs. They're not doing it in the garden beds, but they're doing it in my pots. So I'm taking a couple of measures to protect them. I found some, because I had so much storm damage that I needed to replace some guttering and some gutter guards. I had some extras of that, and I am putting that over it to kind of protect it and keep marauders out. You can see that I planted some alyssum and some kale. I watered that in well yesterday, and look, it already needs to be watered again. So I'll make sure that this stays watered and that the alyssum and the kale and the things that are in there that need moisture to grow will get enough water. Then pretty soon it will be full enough that it will serve as kind of a living mulch, and I won't have to water it quite so much. Okay, because I don't have a lot of storage room, I sometimes have to be creative about ways of using things that I already have. Now, these garden cloches that I get from Gardener's Supply, and I'll put a link below, I love them and I have a number of them, but I don't have enough to cover the multitudes of pots that I have around. So sometimes I will repurpose something that I already have to do the same thing. And in this case, this is just an upside down plant stand. And nevertheless, it does serve as a deterrent to squirrels and other digging pests. Likewise, I did a video on thrift store finds, and I got one of these kind of past its prime hanging basket forms. This one I just turn over. I can put it in there, and even though a little critter can kind of sneak through there, nevertheless, I have found it to be something of a deterrent. So you can use these hanging basket forms also as something to kind of serve as an impediment to them trying to get in there and start digging. Now, every day I come out here and assess what looks like it may have died and what looks like it's still got some life in it. And quite frankly, right now, I just can't tell on a lot of these things. This holly and all of the hollies really took a hit. Didn't matter what variety it was, where it was in the landscape, they all took a hit. And I just keep using my thumbnail to see if I can see green below. Stuart, can you see where I kind of scratched that right there? Even that, it's still kind of hard for me to say whether or not this is going to make it or not. In either case, the foliage is really brown, and I'm probably going to have to give it a hard prune to determine whether or not it is going to be viable going forward. Now, by pruning it hard, that will force new growth, and I'll also give it a feed. I'm still holding off on feeding some things a little bit because we've got that Arctic blast coming. And looking at my 10-day forecast kind of informs me and tells me what I need to do. I'm getting really concerned that I've probably lost a lot of these ivies, some of which have been here for years, but I'm not going to prematurely remove them because I'm not sure if they're alive or dead. I just keep scratching to see whether or not there's green underneath. Another tip is you'll notice that this is still pliable. Some of these are still pliable. I can torque them and move them without it breaking. But if I move something and I try to break off the branch and it's dry and twiggy and it breaks crisply and makes a noise, that's another way that I can tell maybe that is not, that's not going to make it. So those are a couple of little tips to help you determine plant viability going forward. Now, I still can't give you guys a lot of particulars, but I'm going to go outside my comfort zone and tell you a little preview about something. So many of you have commented on these baskets that I've got on my porch and how to make them weatherproof. Well, these baskets actually are weatherproof. I cannot tell you any more than that, other than I'm going to have a product line coming out before too long, and I will tell you the source, where you can find it. There's going to be lots of fun things in the product line. I can't tell you any more than that. I have to get permission before I can say anything first, but there will ultimately be a source for these. I'm so excited about it. Primarily because it solves a problem that I've had in my own garden for a really long time, both aesthetically and functionally. Okay, so now let's move back out into the garden, and I can show you what's going on. There's a tuft of little daffodils that's been there forever, and they keep on going on. So if you can't grow tulips for one reason or another, then try planting daffodils, because they come back every year and the squirrels don't seem to bother them and diggers don't seem to bother them. Okay, I've showed you, Stuart, if you could point over here to my stand of hellebores that I have showed you many times before, and look how beautifully they recovered from the Arctic blast. I also showed you all of the little baby seedlings at the base of those mounds. And look at how those pollinators just love those blooms. Now, Stuart, if you can pan the camera slowly enough, showing all of the dead and ugly stuff, to a brighter spot where I have transplanted lots of these hellebores. And you can see now that I have tufts of white, of blooming white, that are now starting to bloom in other areas. Here's another clump over here, Stuart. And there are other clumps that are scattered throughout the garden. Now, this week, I've got another full week of really nice temperatures. So I am going to do some garden work. And what does that consist of? Well, I've told you ad nauseum that I need to mulch these beds, and I just haven't been able to get around to it yet. I saved some bags of dried leaves, and I'm going to use my Works leaf mulcher, electric leaf mulcher, which I will put a link to below. And I'm going to use a lot of those shredded leaves to mulch some of these areas. Now, the reason there's not a lot of mulch on here already, and that some of the terrain and some of the soil in between the plantings looks so bare, is because we had to do such major cleanup after the ice storm, and we had, Stuart's nodding his head, we had to use blowers and rakes and everything to clean up all of the debris. And because of that, a lot of the natural mulch that would still be in place in the way of leaves and shredded leaves and things like that, I had to say hello to a neighbor. It all got blown away prematurely. I would not normally have blown it away that much. That's why some of these areas look a little bit barren. But I'm going to come back and I'm going to have some mulch that I spread out and around and in the beds. So if we move on over this way, you can see that I did plant these golden evergreens right here, Stuart. Can you see them? These are Nightlights chemisiporus. I did get those in the ground. I've got them mulched. I did in the distance over there, Stuart, when I'm moving too quickly for Stuart to slowly pan the camera, but you can see that I planted those pink hellebores over there. That's going to be, if ever things green up again, That is going to be such a dear woodland space. And then right in front of it, right in front of them, Stuart, can you see the tulips that I planted in moss that are all starting to come up? So what I need, the tulips will come up and I think they will bloom just fine. What concerns me are what I call the supporting cast of the theater that is the spring show, because normally all of this stuff is green, you guys. And everybody keeps, as they drive by, they keep asking me, oh, Linda, are we going to have any azaleas this year? Are we going to have, and honestly, I don't know. I don't think so. I think the azaleas are pretty much just kaput. They just couldn't handle, the foliage couldn't handle it, and the flower buds couldn't handle minus 13-degree temperatures for a protracted period of time. So I think not. But I guess my compensation for that is, even if it's not as beautiful a spring as it is every year, we're all going to be so happy that anything is green and that anything is blooming, that we will put it in context of the spring that it is, and we'll be the happier for it. And again, I'm still want to be optimistic, because a lot of times things recover and are so much more resilient than I think they are. One thing I did go ahead and fertilize. It's one of the very few instances that I use Miracle-Gro. I put it in a hose-in sprayer. Most of the time I garden organically, but Miracle-Gro for things like my pansies, alyssum, annuals that I want to come into full flower now while the temperatures are still cool enough. Those are the things that I want to fertilize so that they are at their best during the season that they really like. And if it gets cold again, all of the, Stuart, if you can follow me this way, all of the pansies that you see here, the pansies and the violas, all of these were planted last fall, and they made it through even that 13-degree spat that we had. So they should be fine. I don't think the Arctic blast is going to get nearly that cold. We might get some snow. If we get snow, that'll just be insulation. You'll also notice that I did plant some of those red ruby perfection cabbages. I got those in the ground. I'm happy to report. And even though they're not doing a lot right now, I planted some white dianthus that will kind of weave, that's a design tip, kind of weave in and out of the stepping stones that go through the garden. So that's all been done, and then I'll come back in with a layer of pretty thick mulch to protect them from the Arctic blast that's ahead. You'll also notice that these are the kind of things that when everything else is really brown, your eye directly goes to anything that has color. And you'll see that some of the Vinca minor that is part of a ground cover mosaic here, it kind of is woven in and out of the green or the purple phlox. That's emerald blue creeping phlox. You can see the violet flowers on the Vinca. And then here's a sign of hope. Look here. Look down there. You can see that there is new life coming out of that salvia. So it will happen. It's just going to take a while. Interestingly, some stuff right after it turned very cold still didn't look too bad. It was still kind of green the week after all of the snow melted, but now it's kind of going downhill from there. It's turning more and more brown. So I'm going to come back and cut back this Nandina hedge pretty hard and try to, if it can't be green, then my strategy is to reduce the amount of brown. If that makes sense. Stuart nodded his head. Stuart nodded the phone so people know you heard me, or that you acknowledged me, rather. I just am going to reduce the amount of brown, and that way it won't detract, at least from the things that are pretty coming out. So that's kind of my strategy. Nevertheless, I'll close by saying, Stuart, if you do a slow pan, if you'll show that from a distance it doesn't look too bad. Don't trip, Stuart, as you back up. But from a distance, it doesn't look too bad, and eventually there will be green. You guys make sure to comment below and let me know what's going on in your neck of the woods. Some of you I know still have snow on the ground. I love it when I get your responses. I learned so much from you guys, and I'm going to try to share some particular accounts that have given me great information. But make sure to comment if you like these walkabouts. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and I'm going to ask you a favor. If you like this gardening channel and you find it helpful either for new or experienced gardeners, or for example somebody that might be wanting to get into topiary or container gardens or learn a little bit more about garden design, I really hope that you will share it with them, because it really is a community that I'm trying to build here. I've met so many wonderful people, and you share so generously. You share your stories. I can't acknowledge every comment, but I promise you I read every one. And Stuart and I, we talk about them, don't we, Stuart? And just how kind people are. So share it if you find this helpful. You guys have a great weekend ahead, but there is your Wednesday Walkabout.